panel in this debate is politicians always haggling over these things on issues of populist tendencies, and because they have biases, that will be checked by people who do these things. We say it's not the farmer that would go there if the professor doesn't go. The farmer has no frigging chance to sit in parliament and tell these guys what to do. Even if they think that everyone should go, not everyone can sit there. It takes people who study these things, who do research. People like professors don't just stand up without any lived experience to tell you what you do. They do years of research. They make sure these things are correct. They do peer-to-peer research. They make sure that these things can take this irrelevancy away. So they make sure these things are okay. In their world, these politicians that do this, why is this very true? Even these people like professors, etc., are people who always come down to understand and know the importance of these things before they do. First case, then, is to talk about the problems. Panel, in a world where these people have dissenting views, for example, where heterosexuals take over vast majority of discussions, in a world where people's agencies are shaped by political decisions and by policies, etc., it's only necessary that people who have efficient knowledge, people who have studied these things, know their left from their right, know their right from their wrongs. People who have immense knowledge on these things are being allowed to share their views. Secondly, why is this very important? Years of generations that come after these policies are made suffer. It's an intergenerational responsibility to make sure that anything that can contribute to the bettering of government is done. The second thing that to talk about is about the agency of people's lives. People's lives are being saved by these things. We say whenever there's a class on public discussion, whenever there's a class that can bring an alternative thing, it should be considered, and these people should be allowed to do that. Why is very necessary? On the third thing, there's a sort of political apathy, and people know participating in politics better on our side. For example, we are not place setting this debate. It's a general thing. The motion never said that. For example, in Africa, people do vote on things like ethnic lines, ethnic tendencies, etc. People aren't deeply involved. The spirit of democracy is to make sure people have full information, is to make sure that to an extent, people always get better. If these things are very necessary, we support the rise. The motion says the rise, which means it's currently not dominant. If they tell you it's dominant, they're insulting the CA that made this motion. It's now on the rise. That is the real thing. I know CG will do a better thing. Why is this very legitimate? We say and we postulate that currently people are allowed to express the freedom of speech. Everyone sitting over here can say what they like. For every professor out there, this is an extension of that speech. What is this to say? It's an burden on Deputy Prime Minister to tell us why these people exclusively should be shorn of this inalienable rights that everybody has. We think it's very disgusting for these people to do this. Before I continue, closing government.
Comparatively, the debate is not politicians versus academic material. The debate is about when academic material features in societal conversation. Is it more positive or more negative? That's the comparative.
No shit, that's what I'm doing here. Panel, the second extension then is to talk about the essence of research, etc. This is to say, these things, what should they do? They should improve lives, to show alternative ways, better societies. The comparative is a world where these people do not feature at all. What is that to say? Any sort of dissenting views they bring, any sort of legitimacy they have that can bring alternatives to things that solve society, are things that they do not bring out. These are alternatives people would not get. These are lives people live not knowing what can go better. We postulate that's a bad world. People not like to do this. We think they provide more good things than bad things. Why is it very important? People lose interest. Things like funding for research work don't go high when they start seeing these guys as people of high snobiety. They have no interest in helping them. They have no interest in using their academics work to make their lives better. We say it's something that is bad for these guys to prevent their work or prevent themselves from engaging in this. They might talk about how people, when they're in the academic world, will stop focusing on academics and engage in politics. That's a very simple thing. Everything they do, it's tied to whatever they bring to society. When Jordan Peterson starts seeing bullshit, doesn't focus on the work he does, but only goes for money, everyone sees irrelevance go down. This guy doesn't speak any more sense. Even if he's getting money, it reduces. Even if he's relevant, because he's no longer focusing and can't do any good thing. When we postulate that these things are tied to these people, then it can't work in that regard. We say it's bad. How does this then like further democracy, etc.? Something that we know. First thing to talk about is that any form of public discussion is a good discussion to promote democracy. Human beings are allowed to provide any sort of idea they have. Everyone here can give an account on what you think the government is. Why should these people be left out? The second thing then is to say that panel on our side, whenever they bring out anything that people do not like, they don't go and say legitimize us, take out things. It's not an autocratic thing. There's always going to be discussion. Is this the best way to move? Is this the best way to move forward? The issue with discussions, the issue with bringing out opinions is that those opinions can be counteracted. The issue of bringing out these things, that there becomes a way where people can choose, should I do A or B? Should we do this or that? They don't always don't give these people social amenities and welfare, etc. We think that's simply a lie. We do not accept that in that debate. Panel criticism of government, which is something that these guys have so much idea, so much, they spend their lives. The problem between the farmer and the guy who is a PhD holder or professor on that regard, he has more ideas. He's spending his whole life, which means that even if he presents the view, it will be much more better for the local person and the person who does the research research on this thing. He's the one who gives much more better life to these people. We think it's a very good thing that they do, that they bring more good than harm. That's thing to talk about then. It's on the third and fourth voices that they bring. In worlds where there are duopolies, monopolies, or three political parties holding these things, these are the people that bring dissenting voice and tell people to become better. For every negative thing they say, panel, there will always be a discussion on the way to go. It can always be counteracted. Other people can stand against this. We win from opening opposition. Thank you.
I thank that speaker for his fine speech and invite the Deputy Prime Minister here.
Okay, I'll start in, oh, okay, I'll try. Am I audible? Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll start my speech in, oh shit. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So a few points of rebuttal before I go to the extensive matter that I bring to this debate, right? The comparative that they bring, that OO brings to this debate is falsified, and I'm going to show you 2 ways in which it is falsified, right? And then I'm going to back up the comparative that my partner gives you and show why that is a world that we do not want, why the world we propose is better, and why it has done more harms than good, basically, right? They tell you that the comparative is that politicians will speak on these matters. First of all, public intellectuals, when they go to speak on these specific matters, they are brought in as experts. If politicians were to go and speak on the same matters, they'll speak as politicians, and I think they'll be introduced and there'll be a difference in the two. Secondly, mainstream media versus social media. Let's characterize this debate. They already tell you that this is in the current world, there exists, everyone has a right to their expression, right to speak, and they have their own opinions, right? We tell you that that has been enabled because of the widespread use of social media. We tell you that even the experts that go on television and whatnot, mainstream media is only a fraction of what is done nowadays. A lot of people interact with this information through social media and not through mainstream media. Now let's characterize why social media is important and how it contributes to this debate, right? To the extent that everyone on social media has an account, and as we have already rightfully stated, everyone has freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and they have a right to opinion. Panel, everyone, to the extent that everyone has a right to opinion, everyone's opinion is respected, and to the extent that these opinions are broadcasted, they can easily be spread. So so social media is the biggest distributor of information currently, and we tell you that to the extent that one person dominates these conversations, then everyone has a chance to interact in these conversations. If they are dominated, then that becomes a problem. So why is it important to the comparative, and why does that fail, right? We tell you that even if politicians speak on social media, first of all, as already mentioned, they speak as politicians and they cannot be taken as experts on the matter, right? So the comparative in and of itself is falsified. Secondly, they talk about furthering democracy and how that is impactful in this debate. We tell you that democracy cannot be furthered if an elite group of people or a specific group of people are dominating the conversation. Then essentially they are dictating what people believe, so their view of democracy is what will be taken in, and therefore we cannot further democracy in these states. They talk about criticism of the government. We tell you that let us leave the job of the opposition to the oppositions, and that public intellectuals should, because we cannot limit criticism of the government, because this still happens happens anyway, because there are opposition leaders and opposition governments in every state that check the government and whatnot, right? So, panel, let's contextualize what exactly public intellectuals do and back up what my Prime Minister told you. What public intellectuals do on social media, when they speak on these matters, because they are recognized, most of them will tell you that they only analyze the situations that are going on, and they analyze it from a theoretical point of view because they have studied it so much. We tell you that it is important that people who experience this thing on the ground bring in the practical aspect of the debate to the argument and to the conversation, because it is important to see both sides of the picture. My partner already talks to you about how agricultural professionals may speak on the matter, but it is only farmers who know the state of farming in the country and how we can better that. There are economists and who talk about these things, but it is only business people who know this better. The best intuition pump for this is the relationship between lawyers and legal scholars. Lawyers heavily focus on the law, and they specify on that, and they abide by that strictly. Even if they go outside that, they explore the gray areas within the law. What legal scholars do, they come in to bring in the physical, the practical aspect of the law into the law. So basically, merging sociological features with the law, which we believe is important in this debate. If we were to leave lawyers alone to dominate the matters without bringing in legal scholars or sociologists to merge these things, then we believe this is something that we believe it is harmful in this debate. Secondly, the rise and why that is harmful. We've already contextualized that this is a social media era, which means everyone has an opinion, the nature of the concept of wokeism and what that means in the society today. Everyone is woke. The definition of woke or what is woke in the society today is determined by a few individuals who think they are right. To the extent that everyone has an opinion, if a few people are dominating the sphere, we believe that is harmful. So yes, that being said, it is one thing to have scholars or public intellectuals speaking on a matter. But with the rise of this, we tell you we are opening a Pandora's box for everyone who has an opinion to label themselves as public intellectuals. And we believe this is harmful in this debate today because it will lead to a lot of misinformation, because there's a danger in if anyone identifies as a public intellectual, is allowed to publicize their information because they have a platform. As my partner already tells you, people are prone to giving out controversial information so that they can get a lot of engagement and relatability. We tell you that is harmful because to the extent that someone is only looking for followers and a lot of recognition, it is very easy for them to publish wrong information, which is harmful to the society today. The impact is, secondly, even if we were to take public intellectuals at their word, we tell you that even if they have facts, they are largely merged with their own opinions, and that is dangerous to propagate, because if facts should be taken as facts and people should be allowed to create their own opinions from the facts that are presented, to the extent that there's a rise in public intellectuals and the mixture of their own personal opinions with the facts that are going on, we tell you that is harmful, because then there's a lot of personal information being transferred as facts, which is dangerous for us in this debate, right? There's creation of trends and hashtags. We tell you that is something that people will value as opposed to the truth. So it can easily be watered down at that point. Let's picture this, an intuition pump, misinterpretation of the law and mixing it with societal matters. To the extent that someone goes on to speak on matters of the law because they call themselves a lawyer or a public intellectual, then people will take them at their word because they have said they know this. And a great example is how, okay, thank you.
Right. We thank that speaker for her remarks and invite the deputy leader of UP. Here.
Can you hear me? Okay. So when there is huge political apathy among a lot of the citizens because they are disillusioned by the kind of discourse that happened in the public town hall, the public space and all that, we think there is a need for us to bring about an issue-based public discourse. And that word is only achieved when intellectuals are inside the public discourse. And our world where there is a rise is one that achieves that in that regard. But when the discussion on corruption equally has become superficial and merely a race to the bottom, we say we need some voices like PLO Lumumba, one idol I have from Kenya in that regard, to redirect and reshape the conversation to a more issue-based one. We say when the discussion on feminism has just become a political point and a move to get campaign lines, we need voices like Judith Butler to make us focus on the pertinent microaggressions that women face in that regard and letting conservatives and Republicans and Democrats just use it as a political tool in that regard. What is the comparative in today's debate? That's the first thing I believe you focus on the comparative, because CG is going to fall into that same trap they are opening sets. First, this is not a policy motion. You don't get to set the comparative. It's a belief motion. It means there's one fixed comparative and you have to find it. If there is a rise, it means before the rise there was something. And in case there is no rise, that thing or something will replace that. We don't think it will be the poor farmer who will go and sit on the TV and the media person will interview him. We think it will be the same politicians who used to dominate in the past before the rise of public intellectuals who will still come and dominate the discussions. It will be Republicans versus Democrats. That's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, as well as what do you call it? As well as Donald Trump and his cronies who will still be on these public television and platforms discussing these issues. We don't think the poor farmer even has the time to necessarily go and sit on these platforms and all those stuff. If they talk about industry players having a voice in that stuff, there will be similarly there will be industry players who are equally public intellectuals in that regard and not be purely industry players like the poor farmer in that regard. But also, we think that why is this true? Because the media guys are looking for more views and more fame. The poor farmer won't give him that. It's a politician that will give him that. But we have to realize the forceful frame that they give to us, because they are trying to say that our world is one where these public intellectuals dominate. No, if it was that, the couple could have simply said the motion as this house regrets or this house believes that the domination of public intellectuals in public discourse is necessarily bad. The rise means that it is now on the rise. My partner's first case on necessity shows why that rise is something that we want. Even if they are dominating, we think it is one that we will actually buy into in that regard. But you have to ask yourself in today's debate, for the last time, the TV, which people are then barely showing? We think that they are not showing much of public intellectuals. We need more of them in that regard. Let me remove OG from today's debate. The first thing they say is that these people have an incentive to get rich and famous. And yeah, but first, we don't think that's entirely true. But secondly, we think that even if that is true, the kind of dedication and commitment that these people have to the areas of research, to the areas of their expertise, is one that is better in that regard. Because in their quest to get famous and rich, we get to enjoy free public information. They are get to get famous and rich, we get to enjoy the benefits of the ideas in that regard. Second thing they say is that there is elitism, and most of the discourse that they bring about is one that is not targeted at the public. They are sitting on their high horses and preaching their values. One, we didn't think that assumption is one that is true. Why? Because their areas of research are things that impact our life. If Judith Butler is talking, there are things that affect women on a day-to-day basis. They is not talking about something that women cannot appreciate or cannot relate to. But secondly, they do ground research. They go onto the field to gather information. So the assumption that they are elitists is something that's necessarily false. But these intellectuals also have lived experiences. The assumption that they are all rich is something that's necessarily false. Most of us are trying to be academics, are trying to be public intellectuals, but our backgrounds are not something that is good to write home about or rosy. We think that depiction or generalization of these people as elitists is something that we regret in that regard. The next thing that they talk about is that these people adulterate the conversation. Realize, for these people to dominate in public discussion, for there have even to be a rise in the first place, there was a need for them to dumb down their message so that the common man is able to buy into that message and understand that message. That is why they are rising. That's why people understand them. That's why people are following Jordan Peterson and all those stuff, because he's able to dumb down the clinical psychology that he has learned to a level that I and Dovolo can understand, to a level that the layman has understand. That's why he's getting a huge public following. They dumb down the conversation. They don't broaden the confusing the conversation, as these people likely are saying. There's a huge incentive on their part to reduce the conversation to that the lay person can understand. That is really false. The next thing that they say is something like these people are monolithic and they give one sort of ideas, and that sometimes harm the public. That was when they were talking about the economic analysis, that sometimes they will make the government tax people rather than giving reliefs. We don't think they are monolithics. They are public intellectuals who are equally communist, socialist, welfarist in nature. They are those who are right-wing and all those stuff. We think it's a spectrum, and because of that, you're going to get a large spectrum of ideas in that regard. They are not monolithic, as OG wants us to understand. The next thing that they say is they sometimes cause harm with their views and all those stuff. Realize, yes, in their world, they will still exist. However, they will exist in echo chambers in our world, and they will be advising politicians in all those stuff. In our world, these public intellectuals get to pit their ideas against themselves. We are able to access it, and because of public opinion, we are able to get to the better ideas and all those stuff. There is discourse and critique on our side when there's a rise and when they are in the public face, and we are able to critique the ideas. In your world, there is this underground and produce certain harmful, ideologies in that regard. Before I go on here.
Intent is non-comparative in today's debate. This debate is a purely outcome debate. But they don't consult those minorities at the ground. Those minorities are forced to accept them because that is the only representation they have. You can't show why they like them.
I don't know if they're professors, since the intellectuals, and I find it hard to believe that we are from the same university. Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology professors are ones that do not necessarily go and take the lived experiences, do not go on ground research. I abhor that generalization of our professors and our intellectuals. They understand the lived experiences of women. They understand the lived experiences of farmers. They do their ground research with them, take data from them, and provide research for their benefits. That thing is something that we abhor and will not buy in today's debate. The next thing I will tell you is the large number of mitigating and checking mechanisms that exist on our side. We say that even if all the harms that they talk about are things that exist, they are checking mechanisms that reduce them on a very large spectrum. Why? Because they have an incentive to remain credible. For them to remain credible within the academic community and for them to remain credible within the eyes of the public. They are less likely to produce harmful ideology, because if you produce harmful ideologies, there will be backlash, you will not be bought into it, your ideas will not be bought into and all those stuff. But secondly, cancel culture exists. Integration exists in our world. Discourse exists because they're in the face of the public. We have shown you how this deepens democracy when these people are enriching the conversation rather than a world where politicians are dominating. We have shown you how sometimes they are the only dissenting voice for minorities, especially when majoritarians dominate the discussion in the comparative. In our world, they are sometimes the only persons who can stand for minorities. In Ghana, and this is my last statement, in Ghana, most people, majoritarian people, dominate the discussion, some George, etc. Sometimes go against LGBTQ. The only people, when the anti-LGBTQ bill, I believe you have all researched already when you came for this tournament, who are standing for these people were public intellectuals who went out of their ways to defend these people. We will not buy into a world where you want to push these people out. Thank you.
Thank that speaker for his remarks, and begin the closing half with the member of government speech here.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to be doing two things in this speech. The first one is to prove why scientific research doesn't create desirable results on social issues. And secondly, to prove to you why so in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to be proving two things in this speech. The first is to prove why scientific research and its outcomes doesn't give desirable results in social issues. And the secondly is to prove, before the rise, what was the most probable thing that happened, and why the rise has far way harms than it is beneficial. But before I begin my speech, let me clean the debate. First of all, the debate is not about the existence or the lack of academic material in public discourse. This means that government burden is not to say that they shouldn't talk or not. And also, we are not supposed to show an alternative that when they don't talk, politicians are going to come in, and that's terrible. It's very, very simple, right? It means that we are supposed to prove whether when they speak, it's more harmful or not harmful. That's the burden. And to that extent, it means that 2 we agree with all they say. So yes, they have freedom of speech. 2, they have more voices. 3, they are learned. But they still do not answer the question. The question is this: when they are exercising their right, is it more harm or does it do more harm or does it do more good? The question is when learned people are contributing to the conversation, does it do more harm or good? So yes, they are learned. Yes, they have more voices. But that's not the debate. They need to engage the debate to win as to how the exercising of that particular right contributes to the chat and how it's more beneficial. Our extension would be to interrogate the role of academic material in public discourse and why public intellectuals furthering this does more harm. But why does our extension rank above open government? For 3 reasons. 1, they say they dominate and that's bad. First of all, dominance is value neutral in that even when they do not dominate, other people could dominate, but most importantly, they could dominate and still further their causes. So they don't prove why their dominance is something that is bad. And that's why always able to say, well, other people dominate the conversation and they're able to do good, like they give examples. But secondly, they say that, these people have bad incentive. Like, that's obviously not true. And because all also responds to this. Devoid of this particular discourse, they have so many good reasons to be able to pursue research. The debate is after pursuing their research and when they bring it to the chat on public discourse, is it more harmful or is it more good? Regardless of this particular conversation, they will still have their relevance, they will still have their money in that particular regard. I think they also mentioned that they are more opinionated. I'm going to nuance this more. So the first extension, why before my first extension, let me just give particular framing. What are the goals of social conversations? For 3 goals, right? First of all, to advance advocacy on specific issues that affect a large number of people, not a specific number of people. But secondly, to inform policy making. And then, how do you weigh policy making in the debate? 2 things. 1, its efficacy, and B, the number of people that it affects, i.e., the number of people who are affected by the issue and how the particular policy have solved all their issues. And thirdly, they are supposed to contribute to the societal evolution. Mean that today's debate must be evaluated on the basis of how public intellectualism has been able to influence and contribute to these goals, or whether they are tracking it back. So the first extension, scientific research and how they do not necessarily, create better policies. 1, there are several issues with scientific research. 1, it has limited funding. This means that when conducting research, you don't have enough money to be able to, extend the research to encompass all the particular people that are necessarily influenced by these things or affected by these particular issues. But 2, limited capacity in terms of the number of people helping you out with the research, in terms of the government sponsorship, in terms of particular documents that you need to be able to cover and fully explore the full spectrum of their sample. And this is very, very much important because issues in society are more complex. It's not like just a mathematical formula that you have one particular thing that you can always resolve and play around. Issues like with feminism are more complex. They have several spectrums of feminism that these things are not just specific. But thirdly, these things are time bound insofar as you do not have your life, a lifelong experience to be able to do these things, right? And so they try to compensate for these things with peer reviews and supervisor. The problem with peer reviews is that it's more political, and so I review yours, you review mine. I don't really care about the extent of it, the research, it's very, very true. But also, supervisors are burdened with so many tasks and makes it very difficult for them to be able to do these things. Yes,
the debate cannot be limited to but even if that is true, it is the rise in these guys in advocacy that leads to granting of grants, research, etc. You cannot limit the debate.
So Kevin will just engage. It's just fun, right? So what that necessarily means, what are the impacts of these things? So 1, I think the last thing is the methodology. The methods of carrying out this particular research. The methods of carrying this particular research are usually more specific and more nuanced, and they rely on old methods of researching that do not necessarily encapsulate the growing trends of social issues and how these play out. And how this necessarily play out in today's world, right? So what are the impacts of these things and why does it lead to more harms? This means that 1, the sample space that these guys use, and I say on niche communities, so research on feminism, just focus on women in particular villages and not the full spectrum of women within that particular space. So they tell you that there's a research conducted on women in Ghana, but meanwhile, they only went to a particular village or sampled a group of villages, and then they did this particular research. It's not really, really whole. But secondly, what that means that if it influences policy discussion, right, they won't mean that for most of the time, the kind of policies are more tailored towards that particular niche group. And so the rest of the material is on a general assertion because that's what you do. So you create a sample space, so 5 women, you interrogate them, and then you project it on like 10 number of women. It's called sample space, and there's this in what that means that one, on the goal of social contribution, to be able to create policies, the policies that are existent on their side, not like encompass people on the full spectrum and only focus on specific. The other number is made up of generalization. Generalization of policies, like, is very, very terrible because one, it does not reach the heart of the situation, it does not solve the issue, it just like creates a blanket policy that makes the government feel good, that makes the government able to rally around these things, but meanwhile, they not necessarily solve the problem. That's why after policy after policy after policy of government like employing like intellectuals, of government employing academic research and technologists to create policies, these things largely do not work and they largely fail because of how these particular research and these academic methods are fine, right? So before the rise, these guys say that politicians were dominating the discourse. Well, that could be true, but that's not important. Before the rise, it's not scientific research could exist and people could infer from these things because people would always quote. Politicians would quote from this particular research and use this particular stats. The reason why that one was important was that it allowed for subjective interpretation of these things. So Izube will quote that particular stats and interpret it in his way that suits like his own. I'll also quote it and do these things. In the rise, it means that we are more going to rely on these particular people to come and defend their own research instead of allowing the people that are affected by these things. Instead of allowing the people that are affected by these things to like be able to use their subjective interpretation. The harm here is that one, the more you defer to the people who created these things to defend it, it means that the more that the harm that I already talked about, as well policies are not necessarily tailored to everybody's preference and everybody's role on the spectrum, but the individual niche communities that these people want to base their research on. It means that one, you are not allowing people to be able to interpret these particular researches in their own way. It means that the biggest impact and why this is problematic, that the policies that come are usually more specified and it unlocks us individuals from trying to represent their own subjective interpretations on how they are harmed by the specific things that this particular policy is supposed to defend. If you want the team that better engages the debate, vote closing government.
We thank that speaker for his remarks and invite the member of opposition here.
Okay, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Panel, in a world where there's a proliferation of social media spaces and people are actually interested in scrutinizing their government and enhancing systems of accountability, public intellectuals aid to this scrutiny, public intellectuals aid to these increased accountability mechanisms. 3 things in definitions, panel, that are actually been left out in this debate. Opening opposition tried to capture on it, but largely government has thrown us under the bus. First and foremost, what exactly is this rise, right? This continued progression and this proliferation of these ideas and narratives in society, right? That captures 2 things. One, current benefits that are existent as a result of this rise, and secondly, future benefits that also would occur as a result of this rise, right? In the info slide, it's very clear. What exactly are public affairs here? These are matters that influence the well-being of citizens at scale, right? This is policy, government initiatives, government action, and all of these kinds of things. Academics panel here. These are not mere people that we're introducing here, like Andrew Tate and other people that I'm hearing here from government. These are credible people with experience who make informed decisions on these matters, right? And who are able to accurately advise governments in terms of the kind of activities that they would like to undertake, right? What's the burden here? The burden is clear, very clear in this debate. It's a harms and benefits analysis and a simple comparative here for why this is taking place and why this rise is actually very important here. This debate is about whether this academic matter is more beneficial than harmful in society, right? This, which takes us into the comparative, right? On side opening government and side closing government here, they're taking us to a world which has a repressive state where people cannot be able to actually properly express themselves, right? Who are some of the examples of these kinds of public intellectuals that we have in society? There's a Professor Wangari Maathai who talk about elements of environmental preservation and protection. There's a Dr. Fauci who talk about these elements of medical information and these kinds of important material that is important for government or society and for the protection of society, people in society society's interests, right? The best intuition pump for this panel is the recent COVID-19 pandemic, where we have very many people who are taking into account a lot of lies and a lot of different matter that does not assist them. Panel, we have deaths people here, panel. Panel, the society is hurting here because people are taking material from other people who are not credible in and of themselves, and public intellectuals have that, to take up that role, and that rise is very important in this regard, right? The characterization of societal views right now means that government policy and government actions are actually complicated. This means that even if people who are interested in understanding, these are incredibly difficult, which takes us to the following, right? Who are exactly these actors that are present in this debate and why are they important? The society, the intellectuals themselves, and finally the government. The government's core interest is protection of citizens due to that monopoly of violence and the social contract that was signed here. That means that they have control and they retain their power of decision making. Contrary to what we're hearing here from government, the government does not cede decision-making control to these public intellectuals. Public intellectuals merely advise, and in fact, these are materials largely in social media spaces and can be consumed by anybody, and I repeat, panel, anybody who listens to some of these opinions that they provide, right? Decision-making has not been ceded to them. That's an erroneous move, especially from closing government, which takes us to the second bracket of actors here, intellectuals. These are generally here people with knowledge and experts in this field, right? This means the following, panel. It looks like lawyers talking about either multidisciplinary issues encompassing law or legislative matters. Not any Tom, Dick, and Harry with a PhD degree can come and tell us anything concerning this matter, right? These are economists allowing us to be able to analyze budget processes better. And finally, the most vulnerable actor here is the society, right? Why? These are the people who are at most risk of these kinds of decisions taking place. They cannot be able to understand them, and most importantly, they affect them the most. What is the consolidation of benefits that we have on our side that largely show that CEOs take in this debate? A, citizens have a better understanding of public affairs and matters that are affecting them. Why? Because these public intellectuals have an academic background. They're able to understand these policies, digest these policies and this complicated material to a simplistic nature, panel, allowing for ease of understanding for these people. Panel, note that sometimes this streaming is normally done in local languages, meaning you're enhancing this kind of accessibility, you're enhancing this kind of understanding. Important things like budget review are done through these processes, panel. B, accessibility of information is improved, panel. Here we have less myths, less rumors, less rampant lies. COVID pandemic was like the best example for this, panel, because there's a danger when people take medication, which results, don't take medication, don't take vaccines, which results in death, right? Which reduces effective governmental action. Thirdly, and most importantly here, the rise in these public intellectuals actually assist in creation and increased systems of checks and balances in society that generally enhances society's democracy, and these are the strengthening these kinds of social institutions, right? This kind of strengthening empowers effective participation of people simply because they're able to understand policy, they're understanding government policy better and understand these kinds of material. Without this understanding, that interpretation that we're hearing from there cannot take place. Let me take you.
So the point is this, our engagement is to show you that the knowledge that you assume is usually sampled after life. I mean the limitations in academic research, and it's poor knowledge to assume for them and used to inform policy. Engage that nuance.
Precisely, right? In fact, you should have answered yourself when you stood up to ask this question. I've already told you that the decision-making power is not ceded by the government to these public intellectuals, and also the people have agency, the people have autonomy. They listen to this material, and panel, the maximization of options is always a positive thing in society. Remember, I'm telling you that the comparative here is a repressive society that has, these kinds of negative harms. What is the consolidation of harms on their side, right? We have the threatening of education and an educated population, which means that we have a less informed society. We have harms in freedom of expression, panel, which leads to people living in that repressive society that we've already talked about, where people are unable to express themselves, and this public interest is unable to be able to, for people to be able to protect these things. For the three actors, we have these benefits. For governments, they're able to be critiqued by seasoned experts, allowing for constant improvement. For the society, we have more efficient governments, knowledge on where to improve, and we have better services. For intellectuals, they're able to keep up the latest information and keep up with this constant research that will help that funding that they're talking about there, because these grants cannot be done if your work is irrelevant. Panel, if we're basing it off of CEO's mechanism here, if we're really talking about impacts are threefold, and these outcomes are this debate is an outcome debate, right? And these outcomes as a result of the rise are threefold. We have on our side A, an informed population, B, a more efficient government, and C, a fulfilled intellectual because they're using their material to not only benefit themselves, but benefit society. I've never been prouder to oppose this motion.
I thank that speaker for his remarks and invite the whip of government here.
'll take POIs from both sides of which bench? Up. Three, two, one. The problem with the closing case on this bench is that they do not argue the motion. This is a debate, not a projection. So you hear them say things like, governments will be able to do these things. The debate is what it has done. Nobody can fiat what government would do. It means we need to take a look at status quo and advance arguments that are realistic, not prophecy nature. Two things. One, they say, well, people have access to issues. What does that access do to the minorities? If a woman knows that, well, 80% of women are suffering, how does it change their situation? This is an impact debate. So for every situation you give, you should impact it. What does that knowledge do to her, that her husband is beating her, so that she finds solace in seeing that she's not the only one and there is no help? There's really no impact on why those things are necessary. Secondly, they talk about COVID. COVID is not a social issue, it's a health issue, and so these things are objective. You need doctors, you don't need public intellectuals. We are talking about social issues that are very dicey in nature. Next thing, they talk about social contract. If social contract really worked, we will not be having this debate. This debate cannot be on social contract. Again, what they do is two things. One, they prevent minorities from being able to subjectively tell others what they have. Yes, we believe not all minorities could get the chance to go to BBC or national television, but among themselves, among their students, among people in the workplace, they could be able to talk. But then the response becomes, oh no, we had this thing from Jordan Peterson. He said it's not true. He said it's 80%. Why are you saying almost everybody is like that? It's just 60%. We think that those people are blocked out of their micro conversations just because a certain expert said otherwise. Secondly, you discredit minorities who have not been able to get education from speaking, because what you have is that they tag them as uneducated opinions. It could even look like people flagging their tweets as unverified on Twitter just because they are not that educated. We think that the fight for minorities need more people as much as possible to be able to engage, whether they are educated or not, because the fact that you've gone through it and you've gone to school does not mean you suffer more than anybody. Next thing, what it means on scrutiny is that we don't like the professionalism of scrutiny, because the problem with these guys is that they think that the only intellectuals you have are for minorities. No, for hell's sake, you have politicians having their own intellectuals who also bring research for them to use to defend their policies. So what you have is research versus research, and they say more funding. That's a very ridiculous argument, and this is why they lose. Because panel, nobody gives money for fun, right? What it means is that for anyone to give you money for funding, they have an agenda. Minorities historically do not have the means to sponsor research as much as the government can do, because they are literally the ones having it. That's why I have many patriots who have gone to a lot of schools, because they have the systems to help them push education. If it's about funding, you would never win on that case. What it means is that we need to bend down the situation to allow for more people, because they can afford to send more professors to Harvard. Minorities in Black Lives Matter cannot do that. You cannot show how you beat them on that specific promise. A lot of things that you should not accept in your deliberation. Intent is not a clash in today's debate, number one. It's an outcome of a certain action that begs evaluation. I've been able to show you that there is no proof that policy came because people like Jordan Peterson, who are mostly in the headlines, are people who never contribute to policy. He's literally screaming every day on why women are getting too much. They don't show why that is impactful, especially in a debate where we need to concede that minorities suffer more. Next thing, the debate is not on freedom of speech. We think everybody should be allowed to talk.
Evidently, people need a chance to say these things. It's an evaluation of the use of those freedoms. And what it means is that even though opposition can speak, it doesn't mean they are doing good to the debate, because like I've told you, they give a lot of unproved impact, just like the intellectuals that you have. They say a lot of things, there's no impact. If there was really impact, we will not have this debate. 3, party politics. They say, well, they help politicians. It's not true. The politician is literally paying you to defend his policy. So what they do is that they give you very skilled research to be able to do this. 4, most of them want to be politicians in themselves. So Nanado in Ghana, he's president. He was a public intellectual and a human rights lawyer. But now you have people being denied from getting to the bar just because they are LGBTQ. We say those people are far more ridiculous on their side. Credibility. I don't think I'm more credible than a professor, but at least I have ownership of my own experience. There are researches that have been done about different people, I identify it, and I've never been asked. What it means is Kojo's case is very important. Don't let the response that is not about scientific research. Social science, literally everything is science in this world. What it means specifically is this: they have to win unless they show that, 1, that research is independent on things like sample spacing. For example, in COVID, there was a restriction of movement, but you have people doing social research in Africa. How the hell did they get to travel and move through all those plane restrictions to be able to make this research? This shows that most of the time it is sampled. We think that minorities need to be at the forefront, because what you have from states is usually saying things like, oh, we've consulted our experts and our experts are telling us stuff. We want the media to come down and see the very sad stories and tell the world, because what it does is that it sparks more public outrage, and we think public outrage hurts government more than things like people ranting in their professor views. Yeah.
Your whole case cannot be the research does not capture everyone. That is a treason. But in your world, they will still advise politicians with other interrogation from the public and other intellectuals. Let's listen our side. If you are reducing today's debate to theatrics.
Panel, listen, right? The debate is simple. On their side, they say, well, politicians might not listen. It means that more times, you still have politicians still not listening. Their number doesn't change anything. Because I told you that for every professor that a Black Lives Matter group can take, the government can fund 4. They don't show why that is more impactful on their side, unless they're able to talk about how they diffuse it. Secondly, they don't defend why that exclusion of experience is more necessary than individual experience. When people are blocked out, realize our case is specific because we don't talk about the media engagement. We are talking about you engaging with your friends. And instead of your friend empathizing with you, your friend goes to pull research and come and say that, well, research says otherwise. Why should I believe you? We think that even if minorities are lying, the government has lied too many times about them, and it's fine if they lie too, right? Because the government is equally lying as well. What it means is that we get a chance to diffuse power. The debate is this: there's a huge power and influence of government and other actors. Do we further diffuse them with people, or do we leave it to the elite to do it? Side CG.
We thank that speaker for his remarks and invite the final speaker for this round, Whip of Opposition. Here.
You can hear me loud and clear? Because I need them to listen. I just needed that clarity. All right. Preemptively, I dedicate this victory to the patrons, the guests who are here to support me. On behalf of CEO, I'd like to say we take the day. And I'd like to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, let you not be fooled by mere grammatical confetti on side government that tells you that this debate is not about the comparative. When the debate clearly reads that this House believes that the rise of public intellectuals has done more harm than good. In its very definition, simple English, more harm than good means that we just need to compare and analyze whether the harms and the benefits are actually of use to this debate, and the outcomes in itself are actually beneficial to the various actors. Now, what have we told you today? Let me just reiterate our case. We told you that we need better understanding of the people, and we need people to be able to better understanding of information, and that people should be able to make informed decisions as a result of this. Through us giving out this information, we clear the asymmetry of power that exists on side CG, which he talks about, that constantly there is a power gap, that more people are more powerful than the other. The truth of the matter is they're only powerful because they know how they got there. If everyone is able to understand the means of getting the power that they got, therefore we are able to empower more and more people. For instance, if a doctor is able to show you his research in maybe a certain drug, you're able to improve that drug through the very base that has happened. He wants us to circumnavigate the wheel, make the same mistakes over and over again, while we already have experts who have done the research that is required. I believe that is extremely counterproductive. With that, they should not be graded in this debate. Now, let's just show you the mess that has also happened. We said that we introduce a checks and balances mechanism that is fundamentally important, which is something nobody else considers. In this same research, we also have institutions of indication that actually certify these research professors, therefore making them more credible. If credibility is therefore there, then I believe that they're doing their job credibly because of the mere fact that they were certified by these bodies and institutions that exist in this government, and that in itself means that their information can be taken to some extent as true. With that said, we believe that you do not need to check. I think what government is telling us is a situation where if you want to improve your diet, you go to someone who eats food as opposed to a nutritionist, and that is exactly a false error and a false narrative, because the person more proximate to the problem, and this is OG's case, the person proximate to the problem is not the person who is on the ground. Reality of the matter is, yes, we do appreciate the farmers, but at the end of the day, the research carried out on these fertilizers are what will make your farmers become more improved and have better yields. The thing is, they also talk about wanting to gain fame and money. I have never seen such things and such madness of this of the highest order, because this person invested their knowledge. Of course, they need to gain money, which is a true statement, but they do not do it for the sake of fame. They do research for the sake of, number one, gaining knowledge, number two, use of this knowledge. And that fundamentally means that they mischaracterize what an intellectual looks like in their world. To them, an intellectual is Andrew Tate. Let that be noted, that is the first mistake they made in this debate. Now, the next thing, they talk about generation of controversy. Thing is, there will also exist check and balance mechanisms to ensure that what you say in these social media spaces, these media spaces are actually something that may not harm or potentially cause havoc in society. When Kanye West started saying extremely absurd things, his account was suspended. When Donald Trump started spewing rumors on the internet that caused public violence and sparked violence, then that itself led him to have his account revoked by Twitter itself. We believe it's the same thing in intellectuals. If you produce a false paper, a paper that does not give us facts, no empirical data, we believe that you should not be allowed to publish this said paper. And I believe that's fundamentally important for these guys to understand. Shoot.
So skewed and general policies that do not solve the issues. Assumption that such policies solve the issues because it's based on research. Ridiculing and sideline of subjective individual experience that falls outside the research scope.
All right, I get. Here's the thing. He talks about the formation of the policy. Policies are not formed by just a few people sitting. Policies are formed to help better the society, and I believe that because we gave the actors analysis, we clearly separate ourselves from OO, because we gave the contextual analysis, and let it be noted that none of them offered definitions of some terms as an opening half, and the debate clearly began in the second half, specifically CEO. Now, I'm here to wrap up the debate so that everyone can go home and give me my victory at the end of the day. Now, here's the thing. You talk about the formation of policy. You cannot form policy without the permission of the public in itself, because they are affected parties. This public needs to understand how these policies will affect them. Therefore, you'll be able to increase the participation of this public. Therefore, you'll be able to fix and improve the policies to enact better services to the public. You can only serve me better if I tell you what you're doing wrong, and I think that's one thing these people need to understand, that only after we are able to deduce the complex legalese in laws to simple English terms for the layman to understand is the same, Only then can we be able to have majority of the population actually following and abiding the law. It is only when we are able to interpret it for them, then they are able to understand it, that they will be able to actually understand what the purpose of this policy is, and even tell us the errors of these things. Now, what is the other thing that we look at? He talks about the cost of research and the formulation of the policy. Advancement of research is actually key. Advancement of research is actually key to ensure that we have advancement of the society at large. You cannot cure cancer by not testing or rather trying to get a treatment that works for someone who has a particular form of cancer. Here's the thing. You need to always find the most efficient solutions. Human beings themselves are people who are researchers at nature. We discovered fire to enable us keep us warm. We discovered medicine through the use of herbs. The thing is, we are always looking for solutions. We discovered policies to ensure that we secure our interests and people's interests at large, and that we secure majority of the population. Now, here's the thing. This only happens only if we actually improve or give participation or give these spaces for discourse, so that we are able to have more and more people coming up and about to tell us this thing. The public interest is only what is going to spark and intrigue the people to have change, because at the end of the day, if I don't understand what he's saying, then it becomes extremely difficult to have the participation. Then it becomes extremely difficult for me to actually enact these said policies. And I think that's the challenge. But anyways, why is this conversation important? Why is the discourse in itself important? You ask me, how does it impact change? And I think this was a question from CG. This is how it impacts change. It is only after Professor Wangari Maathai started talking about forest conservation in Kenya and environmental conservation in Kenya and Africa at large that we were able to know that we need to preserve these things. Thus, we have faced less adverse effects of climate change, as much as it is now prevalent in this through the droughts and other things. And we believe that that is the best. We do not think that people should hold on to information. We believe that the knowledge should be transferred at all times, transferred to the public, transferred to fellow intellectuals, and use of this knowledge. We believe we give better utility, we believe we give better benefits, we believe we give greater harms that exist through members' speech. With that, we rest.
I thank that speaker for his speech. Please exchange pleasantries, give the panel some time, we'll reconvene for the results. Shake hands, smile.